Hi, my name is Danielle Barreca with the Napa County Historical Society Board of Directors. Thank you for tuning in today. It is because of the support of members like you that we are able to still provide content during this challenging time. Please consider renewing your membership or gifting a membership to a friend or family member. Thank you, and we hope you tune in again.
This evening, we have the privilege and honor to hear stories from a local historian and author, Donna Mendelsohn, who co-authored Napa Valley Jewish Heritage. First, I want to thank our sponsors for this exhibit and for this opportunity for this evening, Congregation Beth Shalom, the Doctors Company, Aegis Living, and Arcadia Press. Nikel, do you have any additional Zoom housekeeping reminders you want to share?
Thank you, Liz. One question, do you want me to play the video before Donna shares her screen, takes the screen?
Please.
Okay, so tonight's presentation, Donna will be sharing her PowerPoint for the majority of it. We have you on mute. There is a chat, a section on the bottom of your screen where you can type in your questions for Donna or for the staff here at the Napa County Historical Society. I will be writing them all down and we will get to them at the very end. So if there's any thoughts that come into your head that you want Donna to expand on, we'll get to that at the end of this evening. I believe for now, that's it. So Donna, I'm going to take back the screen and then we'll give it back to you in a minute.
And now, as we're getting Donna's presentation back up, what we've been waiting for, our guest speaker and author, Donna Mendelsohn, who has a visual, rich presentation that will go approximately 40 minutes and allow for a question and answer session following. But to learn a little bit more about Donna, Donna was raised in Illinois. Her family settled in California in 1961 and Napa in 1998 with her husband, David. She is the co-founder of the Jewish Historical Society of Napa Valley, a past president of Congregation Beth Shalom, Napa, a co-founder and president of Ner Tamid, Jewish Community Center in St. Helena. She coordinated the permanent exhibit, Jews and the Napa Valley, at the Napa Valley Museum in Yountville. And of course, co-authored the book, Napa Valley Jewish Heritage. And thank you. Lauren's got a copy of that book. And while we're waiting for the presentation to come back on the screen, because I don't see it unless you see it, Nikel, I do want to say that the book, that Donna's book is available to be purchased here at the Historical Society and also at the Congregation Beth Shalom. She's going to come down here. She's going to sign some of those books. So I don't want to interrupt Donna's presentation. Donna, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Liz. I really appreciate being invited to come to speak to everyone this evening. And I am so excited for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's been a wonderful day. I hope many of you were able to listen to our president-elect, Joe Biden, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We were watching here earlier, and so I'm on a real high, and secondly, because I'm able to be here as well. I wanted to make one correction. It is near to me Jewish cemetery, not center. So there is quite a difference between a cemetery and a center. I don't know what it is about me, but I seem to be drawn to to cemeteries, as you'll find it. I did a lot of my research for the book in cemeteries as well, but that's another story altogether. But thank you very much to Dr. Shelley, and particularly to Don Winters and to Mayor-elect Scott Sedgley for the presentation beforehand. It was very, very well done. The Napa County Historical Society looks just marvelous. So I want to give everyone a big shout out to that. Before I start, I wanted to explain why we wrote the book. And as you noted, Henry Mikulski is a co-author. To kind of answer the question why the book was written, you have to go back a bit to when I first came to Napa in 1998 and joined the congregation and wanted to know a little bit about the Jewish history of Napa. A woman who had been in the congregation and been in the community for about 40 years happened to mention to me that she had gone to the Historical Society to find out about the Jewish history and was told, oh, there's no Jewish history in Napa Valley. They weren't here. And then she kind of very begrudgingly said, well, there were a couple of merchants, but they didn't amount to much. It wasn't very, they weren't very prominent. So that really set me on edge. And at that time, we started the Jewish Historical Committee at Congregation Beth Shalom. And that began the quest to find out really where the Jews were in the Napa Valley, where they had come and so forth. Ellen, I think we need to. And we also want to thank Ellen Elson. We're here as her guest this evening. I was a little freaking out as to trying to do the Zoom. And I asked Ellen, and she, as usual, is so very gracious and said, yes, well, come on over here and we'll get it on here. So that's why I'm here. And what had happened with the historical committee at the congregation was we were very, very cohesive for about 6 or 8 months, and then it kind of tapered down. But during that time, people were telling us that there was a hidden history here of the Jews in the Napa Valley, and we really decided that we had to find out more about it. When Zoe Kahn, who is now Zoe Stein, came to Napa, we found each other, and Zoe was really a great help in helping us found the Jewish Historical Society of Napa Valley. But before that, we decided that Zoe and I would write a book. And then we realized that we wouldn't be able to do that. We didn't know much about what was going on. So we engaged Lynn Weber to write Under the Vine and the Fig Tree. And Lynn is also one of the authors that I think had presented at the County Historical Society as well. So the Under the Vine and the Fig Tree, the Jews of the Napa Valley, was published in 2003. And by that time, we had over 100 members of the Historical Society. And in 2005, we decided to dedicate an exhibit entitled Jews of the Valley at Napa Valley Museum as part of their Land and People of the Napa Valley section. So I know that the Napa County, the Napa Museum is not open yet. But when they do open, there is also a very large exhibit in the lower level, which I urge everybody who is interested in the history of the Napa Valley and the Jewish history, which is one of the cases, to go over there as well. So in 2007, I got a message from the Arcadia Publishing Company, one of their acquisitions editors, who asked us to write a book, a pictorial book about the Napa Valley's Jews. This was 2007. It took us until 2010 to say yes, because we didn't really know who was going to be writing the book and what was going to be involved and so forth. At that time, by 2010, I decided to ask Henry if he would help me write the book, and the two of us collaborated. Henry was invaluable. He has a huge collection of archival postcards and Jewish ephemera. Well, I mean, all kinds of ephemera, not just Jewish ephemera. And he was a history teacher at Napa High School for 40 years. And although he had not written a book, and I had not written a book, I had done my master's thesis. That was my book. And so we thought, well, we'll do this book for Arcadia Publishing, and that's how we decided to publish the book, Napa Valley's Jewish Heritage. One of the first things that we wanted to do was to include some Hebrew into the book to give it more of a Jewish feel to it. And so before each chapter, we have included either a Torah saying, a portion, something from Pirkei Avot, or something that it would relate to Napa Valley. And the first chapter has this saying: the land that we've traversed and secured is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us into that land that flows with milk and honey. And this is from Numbers chapter 14. And of course, many of the Jews who came to the New World, to America, to California, and eventually to Napa, felt that it was a land with milk and honey. So that's why the chapter headings. The first known Jews of the Napa Valley, Jewish families of the Napa Valley that we've been able to research was the Friedman and Dora Levinson family. Friedman and Dora came from Bavaria, and his wife Dora Szymanski came. He and Friedman and Dora, came with their daughter Anna. They set up a clothing store on the corner of Main Street. But the interesting thing about Friedman and Dora is he was 27, she was 21. They made passage to New York, and they stayed with relatives for about a year before sailing to San Francisco via Central America around the Horn, because at that time, of course, there was no Panama Canal. But when he set up the Pioneer Clothing Company, he decided to put a canary as his marketing tool, I guess, at the time. And he had this canary in front of the clothing store, which brought people in. And I guess the canary was chirping and everybody was having a great time. This is Friedman here in the front smoking his corncob pipe. In a series of serendipitous meetings, I met Kelly Darter, who is a sixth generation descendant of the Levinson family. When their house, which the Levinsons built in 1905, was really demolished, not completely demolished, but it was really in bad shape after the 2014 earthquake. She endeavored to rebuild the house and retain some of the artifacts of that time. And what she had found also, even before that, was a huge cache of ephemera and certificates and all kinds of things in the basement of the house that she has made into a kind of a exhibit in the front of the house. And at that time, we decided, the Jewish Historical Society decided that we would honor the Levinson house with a plaque as designating the Levinson house. Levinson family is the first Jewish family to settle in Napa. Although I just heard yesterday that there may be somebody else that we didn't know about, and so we're going to be researching that. But as far as we know, the Levinsons were the first family. One of the Levinson sons, Joseph Levinson, was a pharmacist. You'll see him in front right here. That pharmacy, that store, remained in Napa until the 1970s. And interestingly enough, Joseph was able to procure an X-ray machine so that the physicians in town, excuse me, would be able to take X-rays, because at that time there were no clinics nor hospitals in Napa. This was on the southwest corner of First and Main Street. Son Charlie, this is the next slide. Son Charlie went into the ready-to-wear business as well. I think it was an upscale, more of an upscale store than the Pioneer Clothing Company. It was still a Shmata business, but as we're a lot of Jewish merchants were in the clothing business for various reasons, which I'm not going to go into now. But Charlie was also a very he was an aficionado of fire engines and fire buildings, and so he was a volunteer fireman as well. He was the lifelong secretary of the Native Sons of the Golden West, and he served as a volunteer firefighter of the Unity Volunteers hose company. He also procured a space above one of the firehouses for the Jews, the early Jews of the area, to help hold their High Holy Day services there. So now we're going to go up into St. Helena. Leopold Lazarus and his wife Julia Straus, both were from Alsace, France. Leopold left France in 1848 at the age of 21. He was part of that huge migration of people from all over the world to come and strike it gold in the hills of California. He didn't last long as a miner, however. He headed to the mountains, tried panning gold, and it didn't work. And he eventually got to St. Helena, where he married Julia, who was, as I said, a native of Alsace. And that marriage took place in 1863. So shown are the family members. There are 3 sons. This little, looks like a little girl, but this is a little boy, Sylvan, shown in front, also had wanderlust. And when the Klondike gold rush took place in Alaska, he went up there. So this wanderlust for the family was quite prevalent. One of the things I wanted to mention as well, at the early Jewish vintners, Julia and Leopold had 16 acres of land in Yountville, and they grew grapes. He was also the agent for Wells Fargo and Company, and he was city treasurer of St. Helena. So with the next slide, it shows a picture of one of the Wells Fargo and Company's express wagon, which met the delivery train at Napa Station in 1890. Julia's brother, Jules Straus, arrived from Alsace in 1865, and here he is in his store at 123 Main Street. It turns out that Jules worked for the Lazarus and Levy General Store, and he married Janet Levy. This is a story of an employee marrying the boss's wife, I guess. And they stayed in St. Helena for a time, and then they left in 1881. We don't know the reason why they left. But I think that one of the most exciting finds that we had, one of the surprises that we had, was finding the first rabbi to live in Napa Valley. We had heard rumors that there was a congregation up valley in St. Helena. Nobody seemed to know who they were, or what their names were. But this rumor kept coming up, bubbling up. I want to do a shout out to Lauren Shevlin, because she's done some amazing research for us. And I think Lauren is in the group of people watching tonight. And perhaps when we come to chat, she'll be able to include some other information that she has had recently. But David Radinski had his home, his synagogue, which had about 40 congregants, if you want to call them congregants, 40 people who participated in his services on Fulton Lane, 830 Fulton Lane. And something else, a very serendipitous thing happened. We had heard about this synagogue up there, but nobody seemed to know much about it. One day I was speaking with Sue Wallach, and she also lived on Fulton Lane. They had gone to a party. Michael Chiarello was there, because he also lived on Fulton Lane. They had this little compound there with other people. And they met Scott Harvey, who was the owner and vintner of Scott Harvey Wines. He had all kinds of photographs and artifacts from the early days when Rabbi Radinski lived there. And we took a tour of the place later. And there was also supposedly a kosher chicken slaughterhouse in the basement of the of the home, and we saw the hooks and so forth. That was quite interesting. So this is the Victorian farmhouse at 830 Fulton Lane in St. Helena, which was Rabbi Radinski's home from 1880 to 1910. And the home is pretty much the same as it is here in this picture, this older picture. The interesting story also is that, as Lauren will tell us probably, or we can discuss that later, that Rabbi Hirsch, there was a Rabbi Hirsch from Lithuania who married Sophie, who is known as Shapira Radinski of Fulton Lane. And here he's showing barrels of kosher wine. Because this picture was quite prevalent in the archives and various magazine articles and so forth, but we never could figure out who this Rabbi Hirsch was, and it turns out he was the son-in-law of Rabbi Radinski in St. Helena. Across the lane is the David Fulton Winery, and it was also thought that, and we did get that information correctly, that they also furnish grapes for the kosher wine across the lane. Here's some. All right. Now we're going to go back into Napa. We're going back and forth, and I apologize for kind of going from up valley to down valley and so forth. But I'm trying to keep within the time frames and make some sense of it that way. I hope we're not confusing anybody. German-born Hermann Schwartz arrived in Napa in 1871, and he had there were five brothers. They established his hardware store, and by 1910, it was the largest hardware store in the county. He married Lizzie Fleischman, and they had, I don't know how many children they had. I think we already have it someplace here. But anyway, the important thing to remember about the Schwartzes, this Schwartz family, was that Herman and Lizzie had a beautiful Victorian built for their daughter and gave it to their daughter for her wedding present. And this mansion, or this Victorian building, now is the Belle Epoque B&B. And there are many Victorian B&Bs now in town, which were former homes of Jewish merchants in the area. The legend of Sawyer Tanning is quite well known in Napa, but probably not as well known is that the superintendent of Sawyer Tannery was Manuel Manassi, and they had a mansion that they built at 443 Brown Street, which is now the White House Inn in Spa. Emmanuel developed a process known as Napa Tan, and he also developed which made a very soft leather, because he realized that in the tanning company there was a pullery where the skins were pulled off of the wool was pulled off of the skins, and so they began to tan those, to use those in the tannery. Emanuel Manassi also developed a process for making baseballs as well as patent leather shoes. So whenever you were at a baseball game, remember Emanuel Manassi. So back still in Napa, there was another Schwartz family, the Joseph Schwartz family, and they started the city of Paris. And this opened in 1900. It was located on Main Street. Apparently, the populace of Napa was very confused because you had the Joseph Schwartz beginning of the block and the Herman Schwartz company on the other block. Did I talk about Herman Schwartz?
No, you did.
Yeah, okay. There were so many Schwartzes around that they began to call the block the Schwartz block. Remind me when we go into the chat. I want to tell you a little bit about Herman Schwartz and the Chinatown too. There's a connection there where we can talk about that. But as you can see in the city of Paris, there was also a city of Paris in San Francisco that opened around the same time. It was a lovely store. We've been trying to find out whether there was any connection between the two, and so far we have not been able to find that connection. Another very important business aspect in Napa County with the heritage, Jewish heritage, is the Alaska Commercial Company. You'll see the name of Gustav Niebaum, and this is Gustav, who is sitting here at on the left, with Louis Schloss and Louis Gerstel, who were very important philanthropic members of the Jewish Society in San Francisco. Niebaum was a Finnish sea captain, and he hooked up with Bavarian natives, Louis Schloss and Louis Gerstel. And after they purchased the Russian-American Trading Company and renamed it the Alaska Commercial Company. Because both Schloss and Gerstel had very, very thick German accents, they hired John F. Miller, president and spokesperson for their company, who built Lavernia, which is today the main building of Silverado Country Club. And in 1880, Niebaum invested a small portion of his fortune from his sea captaining in Alaska, and he built Inglenook Winery, which is today owned by Francis Ford Coppola. One of the other vintners and important people to understand and know about was Benjamin Dreyfus. Benjamin Dreyfus was considered to be the first Jewish person within Orange County. He collaborated with Emanuel Goldstein in purchasing Mount Pisgah Vineyard in 1880. Mount Pisgah was eventually purchased by Louis Martini, and the Goldstein Ranch was, Mount Pisgah was renamed Goldstein Ranch, and it was, as I said, eventually sold to Louis Martini, and that part is history as well. Fredrick Fritz Rosenbaum was a glazier in San Francisco. He had a very, very large operation there. He and his wife built a winery. He named it Johannesburg. We've had some consideration of whether or not Fritz was actually Jewish. I think Lauren we're still researching that, but from everything that we had been told, and we had researched through the Jewish Genealogical Society, Fritz was Jewish, but there's been some concern about that. So we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that there's sometimes what you research and what you believe is true is not always that case. And maybe Lauren can talk about that a little bit later. Hungarian Abraham Goodman and Nathan Lauder opened a mercantile store in Main Street in St. Helena in 1887. And I think most people who live in Napa and St. Helena remember the Goodman building. It had changed hands sometime. It then closed a couple of years ago, went up to Calistoga, and then it is closed completely now. But Abraham Goodman was just a very good businessman. One of the things that we found and one of the things I found in researching was that Goodman challenged the blue laws in St. Helena at the time, whether or not people could open a store on Sunday. And let me tell you exactly, I want to, the jury was out for about 10 minutes and they came back and they acquitted him. We don't know, however, how observant he was and whether instead of having his store open on Sunday, he closed it on Saturday. But most observant Jews at that time, and still most observant Jews do not do business on Saturday. So he challenged that law and it was overturned and he was able to keep his store open on Sunday. So now we're going to go up to Calistoga. There was a Jewish community in Calistoga as well. We have the story of Felix Grauss from Germany, who opened a store in Calistoga. He served as a postmaster. What we also found was there were many Jews as postmasters. And we figured that out probably because most of these postal stations were in stores. So these were Jewish stores, Jewish owned stores. The people who ran the stores were literate. They could read and write, and so that was a plus for them. They could understand the finances because they had stores, and they also, most of them were members at that time, as were Republicans. So it was considered quite a coup to be able to have the postmaster designation in your store. Oh, one thing I wanted to go, okay, let me go finish with Felix and let's go back, forward.
Which one do you want to go?
One more, Felix,
Back?
the next one, no, forward, and then I'll go back to Goodman. Felix was a very staunch and very patriotic German immigrant. He did not condone the entering of the United States of America into World War I. And so he downplayed the whole World War I episode. I wouldn't call it episode, the war. He was arrested and indicted for violating the Espionage Act. And because he'd been very critical of Americans' involvement in World War I, and he called the sale of Liberty bonds worthless. But the interesting part of all of this is that there were a group of patriots in Calistoga who somewhat grabbed him. I don't know if we would call it kidnapping or not, but he was bound up and he was made to kiss the American flag. And then he lost his postmastership as well. And they're all from all of that. So his status in the community went down considerably. I wanted to go back a little bit to
Want to go back here?
yeah, no, to Goodman again. Yeah, one of the things I forgot to mention, one of the Goodman sons, Jules Goodman, was a very good friend with Joseph Galuski, whose stationery shop and bookstore was right across the street. The two men collaborated and bought out the Turner building and opened up the first movie theater in St. Helena called the G&G movie theater. And that movie theater was the beginning of where the Cameo Theater is today as well. Okay, so let's go back. through Felix. Okay, this is my exciting part. I mean, Lauren was very excited about Rabbi Radinski. David Hirschler was my aha moment. I have to give a huge shout out to my husband, David, because David schlepped me all over. We were going to not only cemeteries, but we were going to authors and people that I'd found that I wanted to interview. I was very excited to connect with Harriet Rockland. Harriet Rockland is a noted historian, Jewish historian, and she started the trend actually for Jews, pioneer Jews of the West Coast, of documenting that whole section. I called her, I connected with her. We went down to Los Angeles, spent several days with her. She has her archives at UCLA in Los Angeles, and I think David remembers that whole visit. She was able to get me into their archives because she had donated all of her papers to UCLA. And this was before we had laptops. I was in there in the archival room with all these scholars who were researching whatever they were researching. I had boxes. The librarians would bring out boxes at a time, and I was able to go through Harriet's archives. We needed to find a photo for the book that we were producing. And I went through all of these photos, and all of a sudden I saw this picture of Hirschler and Company, a dealer of wines and spirits from Summit Vineyard in Napa, California. I thought I was going to jump out of my skin. Just was really excited, and ran up to the librarian and asked if there was any way that we could get copies of this. And of course we could. We had to pay the fee, whatever the copy fee was. And a couple of weeks later, we got this copy. And I want to thank Lynn Mikulski as well, because she not only Henry helped with the book, but Lynn was a huge source of help when she was able to get the correct resolution for the photos that we needed for the book as well. But this was my aha moment. You go to the next one.
You're not going to talk about.
Oh yes, yes. Thank you. Ella, remind me. We went through this yesterday, and I forgot. I keep forgetting things. I was convinced after seeing this photo that this handsome man on this beautiful horse was David Hirschler. We didn't know his name was David yet. We just knew at that point that was D. Hirschler and Company. And Lauren did the research, amazing research, finding out more information about David Hirschler and his family in San Francisco. But I just knew, I wanted to know that this man on this horse was David Hirschler. It turns out that this short man with a long beard and this little kid in front of him, who was his grandson, is David Hirschler. So we never did find out who the handsome man on the beautiful horse is. But
He's on the cover of the book.
He's on the cover of the book, but we don't know who he is, and probably we'll never know unless somebody comes up. I was at an event up in St. Helena, Festival del Sol, and this was a couple of years after, a couple of months after we had gotten this image of David Hirschler. And one of the ads for the program for Festival del Sol at the time was done by Pride Mountain Winery, and they gave a history of Pride Mountain Winery, and they mentioned Summit Vineyard. And this is a very exciting time for me, because I felt that, maybe this is the same Summit Winery that David Hirschler was posing in front of his building on our cover. So Lauren and I contacted Carolyn Pride of Mountain Winery to get an appointment to go up there, the summit of Spring Mountain Road. We went up there, and she was just so gracious to us, and we were able to establish that indeed was probably the same person from Summit Winery in 1890. So these things kept popping up. I don't know how much time I have left.
20 minutes at the most.
20 minutes,
But
okay.
we really don't have that because it's 7:41.
Okay, all right, so I want to, I'm not going to go through all of the images I have, but we're going to try to get through some of these. This is the Kahn home, another beautiful mansion that Dr. Adolf Kahn and his wife Edith built in 1905. Kahn was a prominent MD from San Francisco. The house was designed by architect Luther Turton. It's been purchased several times. It was known as the Beazley House for the past 37 years, and it was just sold in June of 2018 to winery owner John Trouchard, who plans on using this, probably using it now, to host his distributors. Shelley mentioned Lachman and Jacoby, and also some of the other vintners, early winery merchants and so forth. They were part of Calwa, part of the early makers of California wines and brandies. And you can do the next slide. The head of Lachman and Jacoby was Henry Lachman, who is known throughout California for his production of sherries and brandies. He was considered to have one of the finest palates in the state and was in charge of all the CWA wines. The story of Greystone was also a very important part of the California Winemakers Wine Association. It's today's CIA in St. Helena. It's a very, very well-known site. So that had a Jewish connection as well, and that's detailed more in the book. The California Wine Associations, which I'm talking about, the CWA was a cartel of wine producers financed by Isaiah Hellman and Benjamin Dreyfus, who we met earlier in one of the slides. At one time, it controlled 84% of California's wine. David and I had a boat that we went out on quite often, up through the Napa River and to the Benicia and to the San Francisco Bay. And we toured that area where Winehaven was built at Point Melody in Richmond, California. When we saw it with John and Dorothy Salmon, it was quite derelict. It was one of the largest wineries in the country at one point, but after the 1906 earthquake, it kind of fell into disrepute. Not kind of, but I mean, it fell into disrepute and disrepair. At one time, it was going to be an Indian casino, which never materialized, so it's still sitting there, deteriorating. Then, of course, we come into Prohibition, 1920, 1933, and before that, there was the phylloxera disaster. So during that time, many Jewish families left the Napa Valley. And so the Jewish population kind of declined. And it didn't really come back until we got into the 1950s. But a little bit before Winehaven produced, trying to get by, they produced the Calwa grape juice.
Didn't make it.
Did not make it, no. So when Prohibition ended, people were trying to get back into the business. A fruit distillery business called the Metropolitan Fruit Distillery Company opened in 1934 in St. Helena. And it was, yes, it was operated by and owned by Abraham Shore, who was a rabbi as well. Philip Levin and Samuel Finkelstein, it's a different Finkelstein than the Finkelstein family who's in St. Helena now. And they produced this St. Helena brandy from tons of grapes and raisins. The interesting part of all that endeavor was that somehow, and this reached the papers, the front pages of the papers of the St. Helena newspapers, there was some sort of altercation between Abraham Shore and Mrs. Finkelstein, Anna Finkelstein. And we don't know what happened, what kind of altercation there was, but the business went belly up, and there was no longer a St. Helena brandy or St. Helena distillery. Now we come back into Napa. There was Harry Grossman's department store, I'm sorry, and that was named Albert's, was located on First Street in Napa. And Harry's daughter, Rosalind, married Mervyn Morris, who eventually took over the store and renamed it Mervyn's. And I think for anybody who's been in the Bay Area for a long time, you understood where the history of Mervyn's. There were a lot all over the Bay Area. So I want to get in, I don't have that much time, but I want to get into some of the vintners.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, before we stop for our chat and questions. Alfred Fromm was born to a Bavarian family of wine distributors. He partnered with Franz Sichel to form Fromm and Sichel, and they were marketing Blue Nun. I don't know if any of you remember that. I don't know, I didn't even call it a wine. I don't know what it was, a drink of some sort. And they were very successful. And they actually prevented the Christian Brothers from bankruptcy by marketing their wines. And that partnership lasted 46 years. I want to go into another couple of other vintners that we have. Hans Cornell arrived in Napa in 1940. He was known as Hans Kornblum before that. He had escaped Germany. His father had been killed, but he landed in Sonoma for a while, and then by 1958 he purchased Lachman Winery, and his sparkling wines were wonderful. We remember going up from Berkeley to the Hans Cornell Winery and drinking his wonderful wines. That winery is now a part of the Rich family property. We get into a true visionary. Many of you know Al Brownstein, and that story is detailed in our book as well. He started Diamond Mountain in 1968. Al recently died, and his wife, Boots, was a partner with him in the winery. She died last year. The winery has now been sold to Rodier, and we just happen to have a bottle of champagne chilling in the refrigerator to celebrate this great day that we've had today. Ernie Weir, of course, is very noted and prevalent as a Napa vintner. I want to talk about the Whitehall Lane Winery. The Finkelstein brothers, Art Finkelstein and his brother Alan Steen, began making wine in 1975. And the next picture is a picture of Judd Finkelstein, who was shown here at age 8 cleaning out a tank. The Finkelstein family were great-grandfather was a cordial maker in Russia. Another collaboration was that of Robert Mondavi with Baron Philippe de Rothschild, creating Opus 1 in 1979.
Time's up.
Okay, I think my time is up, Liz. Is that correct? Liz, is my time up? I don't know if she can hear me or not.
You're muted, Liz.
No.
Liz, you're there.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry, there's the controls of who's got control. If you,
So,
Donna, would like to continue, do you want 5 more minutes to continue?
okay. All right, if it's all right with me, it's fine with me. All right, and one of the other aha moments that we had as a big surprise was that of Chimney Rock Winery. I had no idea that there was a Jewish connection to that, but we were asked to do an exhibit in St. Helena Library by Robin Orsini. And so we, both Lynn and Lauren Shevlin put up this great display. And then I worked on a case that they had and we put some ephemera and so forth that we had. Apparently one of the sons of Sheldon and Stella Wilson or one of their friends saw the exhibit and called me and said that they wanted to make a donation for the Jewish Historical Society, and they wanted to tell me about Chimney Rock Winery and Hacken and Stella. I knew absolutely nothing about them. Nobody seemed to know about them. But they did purchase, he was a native New Yorker. He made his fortune in franchising Pepsi Cola and some beers. He had, his wife was Stella, obviously is her name here, and she was quite the socialite at the time. They purchased the 18-hole Chimney Rock golf course, and they built a 150-acre estate in 1980. And when David and I first came to Napa, we played that golf course. It was a very nice little course. It was reduced to 9 holes. They had planted grapes, and they made their first wine in 1984. The winery is now owned by the Terlato Company, and they were very gracious in allowing me to go through their archives. Robert Scally, a French Jewish businessman, purchased Napa's Dollar Hide Ranch in 1982. And he had acquired a 56-acre vineyard in Rutherford, which he built St. Cypri Estate Vineyards. And that has now been sold a couple of years ago and is owned by Chanel. But they also produced a kosher wine. It was probably one of the first kosher wines in the valley before Ernie and some of the others. Jan Shrem, born in Colombia of Lebanese Jewish parents. Jan had a saying, if you want to make a small fortune in the wine industry, start with a large one. And this is, I don't think that was the case with him, but that was his mantra. He built Clos Pegase on 450 acres in Calistoga. That winery has also been sold to Leslie Rudd. So there's been a lot of different transactions going on within the Jewish vintners for the last couple of years. The Honig Winery on a 64-acre ranch in the heart of Napa Valley was purchased by Michael's grandfather, Louis, in 1964. And here you see Stephanie and Michael and their 4 beautiful children. Another part of our history is that many people didn't realize that Dr. Alvin Lee Block partnered with the DiDomenico family, Vince DiDomenico and his wife, and they got a group of investors to start what they thought was going to be a Napa wine train, that people would be able to get on the train in Napa and go up valley. They purchased the Southern Pacific right-of-way, and their purpose was to start this tourist train, which would stop at various wineries. But they got a lot of blowback, and people were taking sides. Signs were going up on the valley, stop the wine train and so forth. But it turned out to be quite a nice venture for them eventually. And these are some of the vintners and winery owners after 1990s. Leslie Rudd, who was the owner of Standard Beverage Corporation from Kansas City, came to Napa in the early 1990s, establishing Rudd Vineyards. He developed a branch of Dean and DeLuca, which has been sold now to Gary's, Gary's Winery. I think, yeah, Gary's Winery.
No, it's wine and something.
Okay, who's also Jewish, and Leslie established the distillery number 209 in San Francisco. Leslie died in May of 2018 in New York City. His winery is now being run by his daughter, Samantha. Leslie partnered with Jeff Morgan, who is producing a wonderful award-winning Covenant wines, but they were in the Larkmead property area for some time, and then they moved a couple years ago to Berkeley, where they have an urban winery there. The Frank family vineyards, we met that Larkmead winery with Hans Cornell earlier in the slideshow. But the Frank family vineyards are now, that whole area is owned by Rich Frank and his wife. Rich is the former president of Disney Studios. I'm going to go back to Dr. Jan Krupp, who a former internist. He started with his brother Bart at their St. Atlas Peak location, and they sold their operation. I think they sold to Gallo, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Jill Klein Mathiasen and Steve Mathiasen also came to Napa earlier, I think in the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000, and they have a very, very unique wine and operation too.
Donna,
Yeah.
thank you. If you want to just take another minute to wrap it up, because I want to give time for people to ask a few questions. I know we've had some questions in the chat box.
Okay. Sure. Let's go through, Ellen, and just hit the last slide. We've got some pictures of events, and I wanted to show pictures of the reinvention of Congregation Beth Shalom. There's a story of that in the book as well. And so I want to thank everybody for your attention. There are over 200 photographs. It was hard enough for us to find 200 photographs and images, let alone 2,000. But we hope that they will give you a taste of what the book is about and give you more information. And of course, the book is available for purchase. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. The history, the Jewish history in this valley is truly incredible. It's the impact on what it's done for building our community is really, it's astonishing. Thank you for all that hard work and research. A couple questions that came in the chat room. One, several questions regarding the Levinson family.
Yes.
Do you know what year they arrived and how many houses they might have had?
They arrived in 18, according to Kelly and the information that we have found in Claire's basement. They arrived in Napa in 1848. So they supposedly were the first Jewish family. Now, I don't know about this other personage that has just come up the other day, whether that personage is going to be found to be the first Jewish person in Napa at all, but everything that we have is that the Levinson family. They had other homes, but the home that they ended up with is the one that was on Main Street, on First Street.
Where on First Street is that house? Do you know?
Yes, I do. If I can find my notes. Let me get back to you. I've got it here someplace.
And you did also mention the Schwartz family and their connection with Napa's Chinatown.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. I'm going back and forth. Herman Schwartz decided that he owned the property that Chinatown was on in San Francisco, in Napa. And it had slightly deteriorated. There were a couple of fires. It was a lot of wooden buildings on the Chinatown. Many of the original Chinese folks who were in that area moved elsewhere, whether they moved to Oakland or San Francisco, I'm not sure. We don't really know. But I got this information from Rebecca Yerger, who is a noted historian in the Bay Area. The last fire that happened in Chinatown was in about 1926. And at that time, Herman decided that he was going to evict any remaining tenants, which was not a good story, not a good thing to do as far as I was concerned. When I found out, I was very disturbed about that. But in any event, he decided that he wanted to build a yacht club and a yacht dock, which never materialized. And the Chinatown left and went elsewhere, those people who were left. Eventually, in 2015, the city of Napa built a new dock downtown. And there is a Napa Yacht Club on Riverside Drive at the end of Elm Street to the right. And It's a very thriving yacht club as well. A lot of people now are taking their boats out. The river has been cleaned up. Donna Winter alluded to that, and I think that you're going to have, if I'm not mistaken, Shelley, a session on the Napa River as well. Is that correct? There's going to be a speaker on the Napa River.
I'm sure there will be. At this point, we don't have it planned out, but
Okay.
yes, we will definitely have someone.
All right.
Scott Sedgley has provided the history of the Napa River. He does a wonderful tour and presentation. He's done one in the past at his history social that we had a couple years ago, but we'd love to have him share again. And he loves it too.
You said you had another question. I think I don't remember what that one was.
Oh, I think, let's just, in terms of the title, tonight's title, Who Tells Our Story? You could select any story, the next story. There's so many still to be told. Is there one that you would like to heard, or you like somebody to do some research and provide the story of?
Well, we don't have all the information on all of the B&Bs that were Jewish owned originally. We started a walking tour of Jewish heritage from Napa Valley and Calistoga and St. Helena, all of the valley. That we did a couple of walking tours, and that was a lot of fun, but I'm not able to do any walking tours anymore, unfortunately. We did talk about doing maybe a virtual walking tour at one point. Maybe that will come to pass. I'm not sure. I don't know whether Lauren wants to add anything to that as to the whole history of Rabbi Radinski. I see her there. I don't know whether she wants to add anything to us or not. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, the Rabbi Radinski story was interesting because we had heard, Donna and I and other members of the Jewish community had heard that there was a community, a congregation in St. Helena. Well, that seemed awfully strange to us, and especially if that person was kosher, was koshering meat in his basement. That seemed really strange to us. But I did find a Rabbi Radinski, thanks to the Napa County Historical Society, in their voter rolls. And so I was very excited about that. So I also love to do genealogy, and everybody I come across, I go onto Ancestry and I start looking for descendants. And when I was doing Rabbi Radinski's tree, I find out that he has a daughter who married another rabbi, Rabbi Hirsch from San Francisco. And I knew about Rabbi Hirsch because there's a very, very famous, well-known photograph from the Bancroft Library of this rabbi, which Donna showed you, bearded rabbi standing in front of wine barrels. But that's really interesting. So I'm thinking that perhaps Rabbi Hirsch, they're making wine, they're sourcing it from Napa, and they're making wine. And sure enough, all this was confirmed when I found a descendant of Rabbi Radinski, Sam Hertzberg, who lived nearby. And we started conferring, and sure enough, he was filling in the pieces for me, and it just all made sense. So that was pretty exciting.
Yes.
That was pretty exciting.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I knew you'd have the answer. You're a superb researcher, and I just love working with you.
Well, Donna, I love you, and you started this whole thing. So thank you for all the work that you've done.
Well, I think it's very important that people know their history. And I really credit my grandmother, who was an immigrant. Actually, my parents are immigrants. We're all, I'm the firstborn, I'm one of the firstborn members of the family in the United States. Everybody else came from Russia, or what was Russia at the time. So
and Donna, you know, the research never stops. And I don't want to throw cold water on this thing, but I'm thinking that Fritz Rosenbaum was not Jewish. I found an article talking about his funeral, which was so not Jewish that, could have Jewish family members, but maybe he just wasn't a practicing Jew. But the research doesn't stop.
No, the research does not stop. We were finding new things all the time. I want to go back to your question about the Levinson house. It's at 1645 First Street. I think somebody asked what the address of the home.
Is very interested in. And the last question being also, do you know the location of the Alaska Commercial Company?
The what?
Alaska Commercial Company.
The location of the Alaska Commercial. I probably have it someplace in my notes, but I don't know often.
That's okay. Well, I do want to say we got many compliments in the chat box. We've got what we're getting is fascinating, 3 exclamations. This is great time to. Oh,
Right.
that's regarding the speaker view. Thank you and a terrific job. Really great information and adds another layer to knowing the Valley. Thank you.
This was not done in isolation. I had tremendous help from the St. Helena Historical Society, from the archivists at Bancroft at UCLA, various organizations, and it was really I love doing it, and I love working with the people that we were able to work with. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been wonderful. I do want to share that we do have our next series. Our next speaker series is going to feature Alexandra Brown. You may know her book, Hidden Histories of Napa Valley. And she also has a newly published book called Lost Restaurants in Napa Valley and Their Recipes. And that book is doing really great. And that's going to be on December 4th, Friday, December 4th. And then in January on the 8th, we have our last speaker of the series for Who Tells Our Story. And that's Ray Guadagni, The Long Road to Justice, which is the story about the murder of Anita Fagiani, Fagiani building. And then also, just want to welcome and invite everybody to become a member of the Historical Society. It really does help us continue our mission to the discovery, preservation, and education of our history. It's a pretty small fee, and it certainly helps a lot. We have one last item, and that's just letting you know that the Goodman is open, as I mentioned in the previous presentation. Thank you, Nikhil Riggs, who does so much as our research librarian on the 2nd floor. You can always work with her on any specific research you're doing. Appointments are welcomed. You can drop in, but it's easier for her to get organized for you if you schedule an appointment. You'll often see Lauren there also working upstairs. We're open Tuesday through Saturday now. We're able to expand our hours 10 to 3 every day with an extension of 7 p.m. on Fridays. And I think that's it for now. We will end this evening with much gratitude, a day of true celebration. It's a historic day, and yet everybody made time to be part of this, of Donna's presentation and hear about all her discoveries and research and the stories she's shared with us. And I guess we'll just end tonight with Danielle Barreca.
Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the programming. Remember, you can social distance while still getting closer to local history.